During my last video, I talked a lot about the importance of painting from life, and while I'm not someone that prescribes to the idea that painting from photos is wrong or cheating in any way, I do think that painting from life should be a big part of every painter's daily or weekly practice. There are just way too many valuable lessons and skills that you gain from direct observation that should just not be left on the table. Painting from life enables us as artists to capture the authenticity and more so the essence of a subject in a way that photographs just really can't capture. I think a lot of painters want to achieve this sense of looseness without jeopardizing realism in a way. Painting from life almost forces you to do this. You have to be strategic about how you're laying down paint, building from general to more and more specific or more and more detailed. There's this sense of urgency that comes with direct observation because no matter how many variables you can control, your subject and lighting and even you moving around as you paint is all going to keep changing things as you continue to spend more and more time within the painting. And while you can get to a point in the painting where you have a very neat and detailed painting, I find that I never need to go that far because I'm able to capture what I'm observing far before I have to break out the small brushes and spend hours and hours detailing. Painting from life is simply a way of painting that encourages good technique and reveals your own weaknesses to you. And sometimes you can get away with those weaknesses when painting from photos. And I think that's the point that I'm trying to make when it comes to painting from life, is that it kind of just forces you to be a better painter. It forces you to be honest with yourself and work on things that you genuinely need to. Now that I've said paint from life about 48 times in a minute and a half, I have a fear that I'm starting to sound like one of those painters that has their head so far up their own ass that they think that painting or drawing from life is the only way to paint. And I would like to say that this painting and almost all of my smaller works, I only make to help me practice and inform my larger or portfolio paintings. And those paintings are almost entirely paintings that I make from photo reference, as I like to tackle subjects and things that I just wouldn't really have the ability to paint if I had to do the whole thing from life. I don't really believe that you can cheat in a painting. I had a professor once tell me that everything is a tool, and if the tool helps you make a good painting, then you should use it. And that covers everything from using a ruler to get a straight line all the way to projecting or tracing your drawing onto a canvas just to get your proportions right. If I remember correctly, I think he even went as far as saying, if you don't know how to paint something, then you should pay someone else to paint it. This really stuck with me for some reason, but where I think a lot of people might hear that and use it as an excuse to find some sort of method of painting and just get stuck on it for the rest of their life, I heard it more as keep learning and adding different tools to your basket so you never depend on something as a crutch. Just because I think using a projector to transfer a photo onto a painting is valid and sometimes really useful doesn't give you, or me in this case, the excuse to ignore how to draw and paint from life, because there's going to be situations where you need to. All of that being said, today I am painting a Monstera, and the plan was that I was going to finish this in about 2 days, which I think I ended up doing it in 3. I just started quickly with a loose sketch of the entire thing, and now I'm currently blocking in the entire painting, making sure to stay super general, kind of just hitting sort of the right values and tones. I'm not being super nitpicky. I'm just trying to get darks in the right spot and lights in the right spot, and then I just know that I can keep layering on top of that until I achieve the sense of realism and the temperatures that I want. I'm not super great at picking out the exact right values every single time. I don't think anyone is, but I do think it's a lot easier to look at a painting and edit it rather than to start from scratch, which is why I try and get that first initial block in done as fast as I can, because then I have something to compare it to, and I can kind of step back and look between my subject and my painting and be like, okay, this area is slightly too light, and then go back and forth. Where if I just have the light section down, then it's really hard to tell what's working and what's not. So just stay general, try and block it in, and then go in for corrections. And you can just keep correcting over and over and over again. One thing about life versus photos is that you can really see a lot more information when it comes to colors, and sometimes I'm almost seeing colors that aren't even there. Like if you stare at a white wall for long enough, you start to see little different variations and things. Or maybe that's just me, but I think most painters do. And then sometimes it's really fun to just like enhance that and just kind of like go with whatever you're feeling, because when you step back, and even if like some areas are pinker, some areas are more yellow, green, like when you step back in that same general vicinity, say you're painting all the white, it's going to kind of like blend together optically with your eye to where you won't really be able to see those little nuances, but when you step close, there'll be all of this richness and vibrancy and color within the same plane that some people would just go in and be like, hey, this is white, let's paint the whole wall the same white, mix up a bunch of paint, where like I almost purposefully mix up too little amount of paint, and then when I run out, I have to like remix it, and it's really hard to match the exact same color, so you end up with these slight variations throughout the entire thing. I'd like to pivot at this point and talk about the quantity of oil paint you should be using on a painting, because I think it can make or break a painting. I think you should be using a lot of paint, like way more than you think you need. With one caveat to that, which I'll get to at the end of this. I'm super lucky that I get to see like a large variety of work, and people will send me work, whether it be a beginner or a professional artist. And I think one of the number one things that I see is that people are battling the canvas, and it's impacting their work negatively. One of the things that I think can take your painting to the next level is to just like use more paint. I think at one point somebody told me to like take a paint tube and squeeze the entire thing out onto my palette, and then just use the entire tube of paint on the painting and just force yourself to go like almost overboard. Now, you don't need to use as much paint as I do, but I do think that you can do some things if you're going to use less that will make your painting look better. If you're somebody that likes to use thinner washes of paint, or like just thinner paint in general, and just keep layering and layering without having as much body in the paint as I do, I think you can greatly benefit from using or experimenting with different surfaces. Like if you're going to use really thin paint, make sure that you're taking care to really smooth out your surface before you start painting, and try and get as much of that canvas texture out of it as you possibly can. Otherwise, you're going to end up in a situation where you're using thin paint over like a pretty rough texture, and you're battling that texture, where once you're finished with the whole painting, you're going to spend hours and hours and hours working on it. You're going to step back, and all you're going to be able to see is the canvas texture. It's almost going to look like film grain in a negative way. I guess what I'm trying to say is try not to like fight your canvas. Like if you're going to use paint, like regardless of how much paint you're using, whether or not it's like thinned out with medium or you're just using it straight out of the tube like I spend most of my time doing, try and like focus on like laying the paint on top of the surface rather than like scrubbing it in. At this point, I kind of noticed that I was having like a secondary triad come out where I was using mostly purple, green, and like orangey backgrounds. So I decided to get rid of this giant like red piece of paper, as I don't think it was doing the composition any justice. And with any paint, I mean, it's still wet, so I was able to just scrape most of it off and then just paint right over it. When using a wet into wet technique, which is kind of what I did for this entire painting, like alla prima, you're able to layer lighter colors over darker colors much easier than you are able to like do the opposite. As I get more into the refining stage of this painting, I brought out a soft bristle brush, as it's easier to layer paint with that over like wet paint, because this is all still wet, and you're able to layer because it doesn't have abrasive bristles. So it doesn't like dig that deep into the previous layers, and you're able to kind of just layer on top of wet paint pretty easily, like without mixing. If you're interested in more of an alla prima, like wet on wet technique, this is something you'll just kind of pick up as you keep painting more and more, as you'll see which types of pigments will layer on top of each other pretty easily. Very generally speaking, you can layer lighter paint on top of darker paint, and you can also layer opaque paint over transparent paint. Alrighty, as I start to get towards the end of this video, I do want to make time to say thank you to everyone that has subscribed recently and has kind of like blown up that last video. That is doing way better than I thought it was going to, and it's kind of making me take YouTube a little bit more seriously. I think I'm going to try and do at least one video every single month, and also I could probably do a bit more if you wanted to see more videos like this one versus like that last painting was like, it took me a month to make and it was a much bigger painting, and it was kind of like, for some reason it was mentally easier to just sit back and like make that whole painting with the intention of making a YouTube video, where this one was kind of like, hey, I wonder if I could make a video with as much value, but maybe it doesn't take an entire month. So I don't know, maybe if you just want to jump in the comments and let me know if you want me to keep making stuff like this, or maybe just refrain and make like bigger paintings, or maybe just do a combination of both. I'm not sure. I'm kind of new to this. Also, if you are ever interested in buying one of my paintings or possibly buying a print, which I do 2 drops a year, one in November and one like towards the end of April, you can jump over to my website and sign up to my email list, and that's usually just the best way to get any notification as to when things are available. I'll usually send it out to my email list first, and then it will likely sell out before it even makes it to Instagram. So huge thank you to everyone that buys paintings, and I guess if you want this one, you can send me an email because I probably wasn't really having the intention of selling it. All right, all of that being said, it is time to wrap this painting up. What I did here is I actually changed the temperature of the light that was facing like my still life, and now I'm going back in and kind of enhancing the contrast a little bit. Also making sure to try and like go back in and focus in on little tiny temperature differences like within the leaves, because I felt like they were all kind of starting to become the same color, and then I just darkened the green for the shadow sides of the leaves. So I went back in with a bluer green, and I started going back over like different sections of the leaves where they would be slightly more in shadow. It's kind of hard to do leaves as well because there's some transparency to them, so there's like light shining through them. So there's just a lot of like little nuances that it's like really, really impossible to get everything right. And in the end, you're really just trying to capture the essence of it. So you can get pretty close, but it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, and you don't have to go like every inch by inch and match the perfect tone. As long as you're getting the right value in the right spot, and once you step back, you're kind of just gonna have the image appear. My favorite part is actually that shadow that I'm finishing up right now. Like something about that, just like, it looks so cool. It almost becomes part of the plant in a different temperature just because the shadow is so prominent on the wall. Now, I probably could go back in, let this entire layer dry, and go over it again and again and again, but there's definitely some paintings that I think are just like, they're good on their own, where that doesn't seem necessary, and I really like how this turned out without going any further. If you think I should go further, let me know. Maybe I could do like a second part where I like let this dry and go over it all over again, but in the end, just finishing touches and sign your name. And here's the result. Thank you for watching. Thanks to everyone that subscribed, and hopefully this video does as well as the last one. Ta-ta.